What if I told you that one of the most beloved talk show hosts in American history secretly kept a list, and once your name was on it, your career felt it for years? Did you know that some of Hollywood's biggest names walked through those famous curtains, sat down under those bright studio lights, and then did something so shocking, so jaw-dropping, so completely out of control that Johnny Carson himself decided right then and there that they would never, ever come back? We are talking about moments so uncomfortable that the live studio audience went completely silent, moments that made producers sweat through their suits backstage, moments that even Carson's legendary cool could not hide. We are counting down 5 guests who crossed the invisible line on The Tonight Show and paid a price that lasted for years. You will not believe who made this list. Number 5, Joan Rivers. There is a friendship that can survive almost anything. Late nights, shared secrets, years of helping each other climb. And then there is a friendship that can be destroyed in a single phone call. Joan Rivers and Johnny Carson had one of those friendships. For years, Joan was one of the most frequent and beloved guests on The Tonight Show. She made Carson laugh harder than almost anyone. She was sharp, fearless, and electric every single time she sat in that chair. Carson trusted her. He even let her guest host the show multiple times, which was a huge deal. In the world of late-night television, that kind of trust meant everything. But in 1986, Joan Rivers did something that Carson saw as the ultimate betrayal. She did not just take another job. She took a competing job on the brand new Fox network without ever telling Carson directly. She did not pick up the phone. She did not pull him aside. She did not give him even a small heads up before the whole industry found out. Carson heard about it like everybody else did, from the outside. To understand why this hurt so deeply, you have to understand what Carson was like. He was intensely private and intensely loyal. In his world, loyalty was not just a nice quality. And the way Joan handled her exit felt to him like a slap across the face in front of the entire television industry. He never spoke to her again. Not a word, not a letter, not a phone call. For the rest of his life, Carson refused to let Joan Rivers back onto The Tonight Show, and he reportedly never forgave her. Joan spent years publicly saying how much that silence hurt her. She talked about it in interviews with real pain in her voice. She said losing Carson's friendship was one of the great heartbreaks of her life, but the ban never lifted. The door stayed shut, and the coldness between them became one of the most talked about rifts in all of Hollywood history. A lesson in how fast a warm friendship can turn into a wall of permanent ice. Number 4, Charles Grodin. Most guests who came on to The Tonight Show understood the unwritten rules. You come in, you're charming, you plug your movie, you laugh at the right moments, and you make Carson look good. That is the deal. That is how it works. Charles Grodin either did not know the rules or, and this is far more interesting, he simply did not care about them at all. Grodin was an actor with a very specific kind of dry, deadpan humor. He liked to play with awkward silences. He liked to push conversations into uncomfortable places just to see what happened. And on television, in small doses, that style could be absolutely hilarious. But when Charles Grodin sat across from Johnny Carson, he decided to turn the entire interview into one long, strange game, and Carson was not always sure he was playing. In one of his most famous appearances, Grodin acted as though he barely wanted to be there. He gave slow, strange answers. He acted almost offended by normal questions. He turned moments that were supposed to be fun and light into something that felt weirdly tense. The audience laughed. sometimes nervously, because they were not completely sure if this was a bit or if something was genuinely wrong. Even Carson, who had seen everything, looked slightly thrown off his rhythm. And Carson hated being thrown off his rhythm. The problem was not just one appearance. Grodin came back a few times and kept doing variations of the same act. He made Carson work harder than Carson wanted to work. Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. Grodin was not exactly officially banned with a dramatic announcement. There was no big public moment, but the door quietly closed and Charles Grodin stopped appearing on The Tonight Show. In Hollywood, sometimes the quietest bans are the ones that sting the most. No explosion, no confrontation, just a phone that stops ringing. Number 3, Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was one of the most welcomed guests on The Tonight Show. He was charming and funny, and audiences absolutely loved him. He fit the wholesome image of the show perfectly. Carson liked him. The producers liked him. Everything about his public presence seemed clean and safe and warm, but underneath that perfectly polished surface, a very dark reality was building for decades. As years passed and the truth about Cosby slowly came to light through the accounts of many women, the image shattered completely. What made it so disturbing was how wide the gap was between the man the public saw laughing under those studio lights and what was allegedly happening out of sight. Who valued a certain moral order in his world was reportedly deeply disturbed by what emerged about Cosby over time. The contrast between Cosby's public image, built so carefully, maintained so skillfully across years of television appearances, and the private reality that eventually became public, was almost impossible to process. It was the kind of thing that made people question everything they thought they knew about the people they invited into their living rooms every single night. The Carson era of The Tonight Show had already ended before the full scale of Cosby's situation became headline news for the world. But the story of Bill Cosby and The Tonight Show became a painful reminder. Sometimes the person who looks the most at ease under the lights, the one who seems the most natural and likable and safe, is the one hiding the biggest secret. The studio audience never knew. The viewers at home never knew. And that is the part that still makes people feel genuinely cold when they think about it. Number 2, Andy Kaufman. If Charles Grodin made Carson uncomfortable by being strange, Andy Kaufman made the entire studio question what reality even was. Kaufman was not a comedian in any normal sense of the word. He was something more like a performance artist who had decided that the audience itself was his instrument, and that making people feel confused, unsettled, and slightly angry was a perfectly valid form of entertainment. His appearances on The Tonight Show were unlike anything that had ever been on that stage. He would come out and do things that made the audience laugh, then made them uncomfortable, then made them genuinely unsure whether they should be laughing or concerned. He blurred the line between his real personality and his characters so completely that even the people who worked with him regularly were not always sure which version of Andy they were dealing with on any given night. One of the most talked about aspects of Kaufman's relationship with The Tonight Show was the way he seemed to actively resist being a good guest in the traditional sense. A good guest made Carson look sharp. A good guest gave Carson easy setups. Andy Kaufman did none of that. He brought chaos into a space that was built on control, and Carson was the king of control. The energy between them was tense in a way that felt personal, like two people who genuinely did not understand each other's basic view of what television was supposed to be. Eventually, Kaufman's appearances on The Tonight Show came to an end. The show simply stopped booking him. For a performer who lived to mess with the line between real and fake, being quietly removed from one of television's biggest stages, was its own strange kind of ending. Andy Kaufman passed away in 1984, and the world never quite figured out how to categorize him. Was he a genius? Was he exhausting? Was he both? Probably both. Number 1. Zsa Zsa Gabor. And now we arrive at the moment that was teased at the very beginning, the moment that made an entire live studio audience go silent, the moment that made Johnny Carson, a man who had handled every possible kind of human chaos for 30 years, visibly lose his composure on live television. The person at the center of this moment was Zsa Zsa Gabor, and what happened during her Tonight Show appearance became one of the most replayed and most shocking moments in the entire history of late-night television. Zsa Zsa Gabor was a Hungarian-American socialite and actress who was famous for being famous long before that was a common thing. She was glamorous and outrageous, and she knew it, and she leaned into it completely. She was not always on The Tonight Show to promote a specific project. Sometimes she was there simply because she was Zsa Zsa, a personality so large that she was her own reason for being on television. But on one very specific night, Zsa Zsa Gabor brought a rooster onto The Tonight Show as part of her appearance, a live rooster. On the set, under the lights, in front of a live studio audience, was the kind of thing that the producers of a live television show have actual nightmares about. Zsa Zsa, with full dramatic flair, placed the rooster very close to Johnny Carson and encouraged him to, there is no delicate way to say this, feel the bird. She used language that was, by the standards of the time, shockingly suggestive for live network television. She delivered her lines with a straight face and complete confidence, as though this was completely normal behavior. The studio audience erupted. Carson's face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds. Backstage, producers were reportedly scrambling, unsure whether to cut to commercial or just let it play out. The moment had a chaotic, electric energy that was almost impossible to describe unless you watch the clip yourself, which you absolutely should, because reading about it does not do it justice. It was not just that the content was surprising, it was the confidence. It was the complete lack of embarrassment. It was the way Zsa Zsa seemed to be enjoying every single second of the chaos she had created. Carson was not amused in the way the audience was amused. He laughed because he had to. The cameras were right there, and the audience was roaring. But behind his eyes you could see something else. Something more like disbelief, something more like a man quietly making a decision. And the decision, it turned out, was final. Zsa Zsa Gabor was not invited back to The Tonight Show. The rooster incident became the thing she was most famous for in connection with that show, which is remarkable when you consider that she had been a Hollywood figure for decades before that night. All of those years, all of those appearances, all of that glamour and history, and what everyone remembers is a rooster and a moment that made Johnny Carson's eye twitch on live television. The ban was real, and it lasted. Zsa Zsa went on to have a complicated life in the years that followed. She had legal troubles and health challenges that occupied her final decades. She passed away in 2016 at the age of 99. But the rooster moment lived on. It was clipped and shared and referenced and laughed about for generations after it happened. And Johnny Carson's expression in that moment, that frozen, barely holding it together look, became a perfect symbol of what happens when a live television show completely loses control of itself for 30 seconds.